Hello, everyone. Um, welcome back to our Instagram Live episode number 2 of the series of episodes that we're gonna be having with Governor Juffa. So I am so excited to be joining each one of you this afternoon to have this conversation, and I'm sure you have already seen the flyer. You have already seen um, what we'll be talking about, but this is basically something that I'm passionate about. And you all, for those who have known me for a long time, you will know that I'm very, very passionate about creating spaces where conversations can be held. So, from this platform and with this platform that I have, I want to have as many discussions as possible, as many conversations as possible about issues, about passion, about making aware of an issue, awakening our mindset to a particular issue, and being able to address it, to take action. So I know I am not going to be doing it alone, but I have a lot of people or friends or others who are in this space together, who are fighting together with me in creating spaces that are actually encouraging of growth, encouraging of prosperity, encouraging of civil discourse, particularly. So to this afternoon, I'm very, very excited to introduce to you our guest, my guest for this afternoon, and for this episode number 2. And there will be series of conversations as well, and this is the first series of conversations that I will be having with Governor Juffa. And yes, he will be joining me on live, and we will be having this conversation about everything that we need to know about leadership, about political leadership, as well as grassroots level leadership, activism, and everything in between. So, if you don't know, Gary Juffa is the Honorable Gary Juffa is the governor for Oro Province. He has been the governor since 2012, when he resigned in 2011 to contest in 2012 election, and since then he won the seat in 2012, and he has been maintaining that seat from 2012 to 2017. That's first term. 2017 to 2022. This is the second term. So he has a vast knowledge in this area, in terms of leadership, in terms of political leadership, activism, grassroots level mobilization, and in the area of environmental protection, deporting illegal loggers. It's everything. So he is also known as the political agitator. So he is one that makes you feel uncomfortable with the truth. And that is the kind of leaders that we need in our time and in our space. So I'm very, very excited to bring him on to have this conversation with you all. So I will just check if he is in the building. Of course, not in the building where I'm at, but in the building, as visually in the building on Instagram. Okay, let's see. All right. So he hasn't entered the charts yet, but yes, just to give you a background about who he is. He grew up in the village with his mom, moving from one place to the other. His mom was the family. She was working in the area of health, and so he used to move around. But of course, he's gonna cover that story later on. But one thing that I really, really think that is aligning with what I am passionate about, and what I want to encourage this conversation, is that he is not only a political leader, he is also an activist. someone who stands up, someone who questions the status quo, someone who questions, how decisions are being made, how leadership should be like, and he questions people's motives, stands up against tycoons, illegal loggers, and all of this kind of madness that happens in our country. So he is not just a political leader, he is also an activist, but we will be getting to him being a political leader and an activist later on. But for this session, you'll know about him. He is an amazing person. He, all of us look up to him, especially the young aspiring politicians, because of his strong, because of his strong leadership. So we don't know, like most of us don't know the story of his upbringing, where he grew up in, and how he came to be where he is now. So this session is just focused on getting to know Honorable Gary Juffa, getting to know Gary Juffa. So I will go back and check if he has joined us. Right, just hang in there. We'll have a great conversation. And okay, he's not in the building yet. All right. So let me just send him a message. Hopefully he can answer. Okay. Sorry. I wish I have two phones, but I only have one phone, so I cannot end this. Okay, he's in. He's in. Let's go. Um, yes, he's on. He's on. Hello, Honorable Gary Juffa. Hi. Good
Hi,
afternoon to
how
you.
are you? And how's everyone?
I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm good. I'm good.
Wonderful. I sincerely apologize if it is, I'm sure like this is a time where you're very busy with everything going on with elections and stuff like that, but I really appreciate you making time to join me on this live conversation. I really, really do.
You're welcome. And look, what's more important than, helping people who are doing great things to help the country? I mean, I'm a huge advocate of young people stepping up and, doing their best for Papua New Guinea. And I think they're the hope for the future. And wherever we can, if we're in positions of responsibility, we should be contributing to that effort. So no problem. If you give me a heads up, if you give me ample time, I'll make time. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Governor. So I was just giving an introduction about what this platform is, but before I get into that, I just wanted to recite something that I wrote today on Instagram, and if you don't mind, because today is the Anzac Day,
Correct.
and we know that it is very important for us to remember people who have fallen, people who are still standing, people who will stand, in this space to protect our freedom in the past, present, and future. So if you don't mind me just reciting something before we get into this conversation,
Sure.
as
Not at
a
all,
way
not at
of
all.
kind of respect. All right. So I wrote something this morning, and I just wanted to recite it. So it says, "Lest we forget the ones who have fallen with pride, dignity, strength, honor, loyalty, love. Their families who gave all they had, their son, daughter, father, mother. The ones who still stand, standing with pride, dignity, strength, honor, loyalty, love. Their families who give all they have, their son, daughter, father, mother. And the ones who will stand with pride, dignity, strength, honor, loyalty, love. Their families who will give all they have, their son, their daughter, their mother, and their father. And for this we stand, and for this we um, remember this day, because we know that peace comes at a cost, and freedom also comes at a cost. And for that, war is also costly. And remembering that, and remembering what we have, acknowledging and appreciating what we have today, the freedom that we have, will bring us a longer way in this space, and for the generations to come. So I just wanted to recite that little piece I wrote this morning before we get into the conversation. So thank you so much for making the time for me to do that.
You're welcome, and that's a wonderful tribute to, you know, those who sacrificed sometimes their ultimate sacrifice, which was themselves, their lives, so that we could be here. I was at Isurava today. I went with the Australian High Commissioner and the Chief of the Air Force for Australia. We went to lay wreaths at Isurava, where there was a battle there that had been fought along the Kokoda Trail. And, you know, it's always emotional for me, because my grandfather fought in that war. He was the man who raised me. He was private number 100, and he had fought with many of his colleagues in the Papuan Infantry Battalion in that war. So many have made sacrifices, you know, so that we could be here. And that's something I feel we need to pay a lot more attention to than we do. We take our freedom for granted. We take our country for granted, I feel, because we don't think about the sacrifices that many have made. A wonderful poem, thank you.
Thank you, Governor. So it's very wonderful as well, because every day I think about freedom. I think about, you know, what has been sacrificed for us to be here. Even though we think back to our in our past, and especially PNG, in terms of our ancestors who have taken part in the war. It wasn't our war, but it was brought to our shore. And so we had to, you know, really stand up and do something about it. So, and also our spirit in standing up with the military or the army of the time from different parts of the world, especially Australia, New Zealand, and America, who were here to fight. It really showed our true character as Papua New Guineans, who really, you know, stood up and gave our time to help in the war. So that's very important to acknowledge as well.
Absolutely.
All right. So to get into this evening's conversation, I know, like, we hear so much about you, but don't really know. And sorry about the background noise. We don't really know. Some of us, some of the people who don't follow you, they don't really know your story, like growing up. And I just wanted this series to focus on us getting to know you better as an individual, as Gary Juffa, you know, because we only see you in politics, in activism, but we don't really have a clear story of how and where you started all these journeys. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you attended school, or something like that. And just your early childhood.
It might be too long. I'll summarize it.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
I'll just give the basics. I'm very flattered that you would want to, or anyone would want to know my background and where I came from and how I came up, etc. I tell these stories, I write them sometimes, and I post them on social media, so that in some way I hope it can also help others who, you know, especially our young people, our children, who might be going through similar situations, who might be going through some challenges in their childhood whilst they're growing up, or as young teens or young men or women. And so I tell these stories to basically demonstrate that, you know, you'll have challenges, but there's always hope and you can overcome them. You've just got to be determined to do it and, you know, take each day as it comes and do the best you can with what you have. That's probably my favorite phrase, you know. So I grew up in many parts of Papua New Guinea, firstly in Kokoda, in a plantation which was owned by my grandfather. His name, he has a very long name, a tribal name, but the shortened version of it is Victor Juffa. And Victor Juffa served in the Papuan Infantry Battalion during World War II. He had 5 daughters and 1 son. He raised me on that small plantation. I was born to Felicity Juffa, his second-born daughter, who was studying to be a nurse in the Western Province, and she had met my father over there at that time. He happened to be working there on a boat owned by my grandmother's uncle, Uncle Jack Sweeney, or grand uncle, I would call him. And he had just finished from the Australian Navy, and he was there, working there, and Dad had been sent there to work with him. An interesting story, you recited something very, very moving earlier about the sacrifices people make, about war. So Uncle Jack Sweeney, in 1969, his boat brought across the first West Papuan refugees into PNG. And that's one of the reasons why I'm connected to that issue. And I have been connected to that issue for so long. And he told, we're digressing a little bit. We're supposed to be talking about my history, but I thought I'd use this opportunity to tell this story. He told
Yes,
me a
absolutely.
story. Thank you. He told me a story that I'll recite that, you know, I think of from time to time, a story of great sacrifice. And it's the story of the West Papuan people and why they are where they are and how they are where they are. It's a part of that story. But, you know, West Papua had been this nation, and it was in 1959 that they had actually attained a form of independence. Okay, and they were already moving ahead to become a country when they were invaded by Indonesia. And the invasion took place, and you have to forgive me, my dates are not entirely correct. I want to say 1952, but I'm sure it's 1954, thereabouts. And they were occupied by Indonesia, and despite the efforts of countries like Holland and others to, you know, secure their freedom, they were forced to live that situation. And until 1969, when there was a referendum, that was the thinking of the United Nations and the powers that be at that time. So in 1969, they had what they call a referendum, but it was not a proper referendum, because in a referendum, a political referendum, every adult is supposed to vote for a particular, you know, for a decision to be made in regards to a question posed to the people. In this case, the question was, do you want to be free and be a free country, or do you want to remain part of Indonesia? So in 1969, 1,024 elders were virtually forced at gunpoint to vote to remain part of Indonesia. And the rest of the world watched this happen and did nothing about it, because at that time, there was serious concern that if they didn't bring Indonesia into the West and maintain them, they might go across to the communist nations, you know, Russia at that time, the USSR, and China, and henceforth, so forth. So the rest of the nations all stood there and watched silently and said nothing, you know. And this referendum, which was really not a real referendum, took place. This act of what they call free choice, but it was actually an act of no choice. So at that time, all the boats that were around there, all the ships, you know, Papua New Guinea was still a part of Australian territory, and they were informed to go to the border because there would be a possible, you know, evacuation needed of refugees. So my Uncle Jack, he told me this story many times. I always asked him to tell me. And the last time he told me, I was in Brisbane. I went to visit him. He was 95. He passed on 2 years ago. He was 96 when he passed on. Sorry, about 4 years ago. And he told me when the boat arrived and the West Papuan men took their women and children and put them on the boat, 200 of these men. But they never told their wives or their children that they were staying back. So it was a very, you know, it's a very moving story. And if you want to think about sacrifice, that's an example of great sacrifice. Those men knew that they would probably never see their wives or children again. They stayed back and started the rebel movement that eventually became the West Papuan Operasi Papua Merdeka, or OPM movement. So, you know, you want to talk about, when we talk about sacrifice, these are some of the sacrifices people make. We take our freedom for granted. We wake up and do whatever we want. We complain about anything to anyone. You know, we moan and whine about things we don't have. And we forget about what we have. This rich country, for instance, we forget about the freedom we have, you know, to be able to just say what we want, to be able to move freely, to be able to express our opinions, to be able to create political parties and vote and fly our national flag and sing our songs. We forget that we have the freedom to do all these things. Right next door, they don't have that freedom, you know? So it's I just use this opportunity to just relate this story to yourself and our listeners. I'm sorry we diverted or digressed, but that story was told to me by my Uncle Jack Sweeney. And even though he was in his 90s, he could still recall exactly how it happened, what happened, and he told me about it. Interestingly enough, a few years ago, the late Fred Mambrasa, who was a dear friend of mine from West Papua, he was a strong West Papuan freedom advocate. He saw me, he came to me one day and he said, "Governor, we have a delegation from West Papua to see you, a small delegation." And I said, "Really?" And they had a gift for me because they were one of the families on that boat. Yeah. So I was very moved. I was honored. I went to Rainbow and met them, and they gave me this gift. It was a sword, a tribal sword, and they gave me some traditional ornaments, and they gave me a name. My West Papuan name is Mambre, and it means he who fights and speaks for us, you know. So it was a very moving event for me. But anyhow, that's one of many stories I have. I'm not going to tell you all these stories, otherwise we would be here for hours. Anyhow, my mother and father had met in Western Province, and they had contention over, you know, my birth. I don't know the details. I don't really want to know or go into those details. But my grandfather took my mother home, and when she gave birth to me, took me and raised me. That's essentially what happened to me. And I lived with him in Kokoda for 4 years. It was the best 4 years of my life. It was like paradise, you know. He had a cocoa plantation, he grew coffee, and rubber, and he had chicken and pigs, and every morning I'd wake up with him at the crack of dawn. We'd make our bed. This is something I do even to this day, that every day, wherever I am, even if I'm in a hotel room, I will make my bed. That's something that he taught me. So it's the first thing I do. It's an old soldier's ritual. So because he was an old soldier, he was very regimented. He was still a soldier. Then he passed on, and it was a very sad moment in my life. I then went to live with my mother, who was a nursing officer. My mother was a nursing officer, and she was posted all over PNG. And at that time, she was posted in Mendi. So we went to Mendi, and we lived there for a little while. Mendi was very beautiful. It still is beautiful, I would say, but at that time, I remember how beautiful it was. We lived in a place called Army Hill, and my mother was working at the Mendi Hospital, for a little while. And then we went to Yalibu, and we stayed there. It was, again, another very beautiful place. And my mother worked at the hospital there. My first community school was in Yalibu. I went to Yalibu Community School there. And
Oh, wow.
and as a result, I have a lot of family from Yalibu, because there was a family there, late Aloysius Nale. His family sort of adopted us, and we were there for some time. And as a result, I'm still very close to a lot of the people from Yalibu and Mendi as well. Then after that, Mom was posted to Hagen, and I went to Minch while she was sorting herself out, and I lived in Minch for a little while. I went to school there at John Bosco Community School, and made lots of good friends. And as a result, I have still got a very strong connection with people from Chihuahua, and they're very close to me, Mom settled in Hagen, so I went to Hagen, lived there, and I came to be a part of the Koroka family, okay? The family of late Sir Kagul Koroka. His first wife was my mother's best friend, and the children were, so we became friends, and to this day, they're my family, So, and then went to Leh for a little bit. Then my mother had a car accident, and she needed to be, rehabilitated. She needed treatment. She'd injured herself. She had some serious damage to her brain and whatnot. So I was sent home, back to Kokoda. And I remember when I was sent home, it was supposed to be for 2 weeks. I stayed there for almost 3 years, going to school there. So I went to school at the Kokoda Community School. I lived with my grandmother in that same plantation. I used to walk to school and walk back and help her with the cocoa and the rubber and the coffee. We'd pick that and we'd sell that. There's no electricity at that time. It's a very, very raw life, but beautiful life. Yeah, and I had my dog with me at that time, Santo. He was my best friend. So it was my grandmother and my dog and a few other relatives who happened to be living there. One of my aunties lived there as well with her children. Yeah, and Kokoda Station was very pretty, very beautiful. We lived there until I went to Bougainville. My mother was, she'd gone back there from Leh. She had been posted there with my stepfather. She'd married. And I lived there in Bougainville for I did my grades, my last bit of grade 6 at the Caperia Community School. Then I did grade 7 and 8 at the Loloho International. I attended an international, this is something funny about, I have to tell this story. When my mom had money, I would go to an international school. She said, you need to interact with people from all over the world. So you need to interact with children from other countries and understand
Absolutely.
what the rest of the world is. When she was going through hard times and difficult situations, then she would send me back to the village or stay with her friends or relatives, and then I would go to a community school. And I loved both. You know, I learned so much from both environments. And I look back
Yeah.
now, and I'm fortunate and lucky that I was able to go through that situation so that I can empathize, I can understand where, you know, what everyone goes through and what everyone went through. Then there was the crisis. So I was sent to live in Moresby with my aunt for a couple of years. I did my year 9 and 10. And then I got kicked out of school, but I managed to graduate before I got kicked out. I was not allowed to go back to school. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
Then I went to Ley to do my year 11 and 12 there, but my uncle didn't pay for my school fee, so I was also kicked out of school there. And I was just roaming the streets there, I guess. My mother was in Popondetta at that time working, and she came and took me to Oktedi. She said, why don't we go to Oktedi, where my stepfather was? So my stepfather and my mother had an on-off relationship. And anyway, they were this time on again. They were together in Oktedi, and I went there and lived there, and I worked there. I was 17. I worked in a workshop for about almost 1.5 years. And I did matriculation, and I managed to get good marks, and I came to university in 92. And so that's my background. Sorry, it's such a long story, but
No,
you know,
no,
that's my background.
that's amazing. I mean, we don't get to hear this, story about you. Like everything you just shared. Maybe I've read like snippets of it on your profile, but you just gave like the whole context of why we see you as a Papua New Guinean leader and not just from your province, not just the governor of your province, but someone who is a Papua New Guinean and who is a Papua New Guinean leader, because you just said that you actually lived across PNG.
Yeah,
So it gives you that 360 view of context and of issues or even culture as well of families. So you have um, what would I say, families all across the country. And so I think it's a beautiful thing. And especially in Papua New Guinea, it's something that we all can relate to because we come from a village. Some can relate to everything you said. There's one person on this chart that can definitely relate to that story, like your parents or you growing up with your mom while she was moving around for work, or just growing up with your uncle. I mean, and in the village, I grew up in the village as well. Like I would carry my younger sister after elementary school home because her legs were hurting. So like I would carry her from like in the middle of the road all the way home. And if it's like 1 hour or 30 minutes, I'll just carry her. And it didn't matter if she was heavy or not. She was my sister and her legs were hurting. So I would carry her. So I think everyone who comes from the village will definitely relate to everything that you just shared, like all parts of your story. At least one part of it, they can relate to it. And I really, really admire the story you shared about the West Papuans and how that story, happened, and the sacrifice, the true definition of what sacrifice is, and fighting for freedom and what it looks like. I think so many people will never really understand the courage and the strength it takes for individuals who put their hand up to really stand up and fight for freedom. So that story just like really really tore my heart apart, especially when you said we on this side are taking our freedom for granted, and then our brothers on the other side and sisters on the other side are struggling. So what are we doing with the freedom that we have? That really struck a chord in my heart. Like that statement was like it. So that there is no reason why we should be complaining. There is no. I am speaking to myself as well. I'm probably one of the few people who complain a lot about so many things, but I am taking this statement to heart that we have the freedom to do anything that we want to do, start something that we want to start, and our friends and our brothers and sisters on the other side of the border do not have that. So what are we doing with the freedom that we have? That statement is just so powerful. So thank you so much for sharing that particular story. It really, really is very important for our young people, especially to know the difference that we have and how we can harness the freedom that we have to not only help ourselves but help those who are in need as well of freedom, like our brothers and sisters in West Papua. So that is such a beautiful story. And like just you growing up, and I'm sure you have so many special moments in your life that you treasure. Um, Probably you think back to where you are now, you think back and you say, oh, I wish I'm still a kid so that I can just run carelessly, run into the bush or wash in the river or whatever. But what is like one precious moment like while growing up? We won't get into you getting into politics or whatnot. That will be a conversation for later and your all the activism work that you do. But for now, is just getting to know you. So, what is like one special moment that like is really something that you treasure to this day that happened to you when you were a kid or you're a young adult? Something special or a moment that really um, is a moment that you have never forgotten about it. Probably that's taught you something or not. What is it?
Well, there are. I mean, there's so many. So I have to think about it because I've off the off my hand I can name several. You know, um, and most of them involved my very early childhood, uh, and one of the probably the most important moment for me was the moment when my grandfather died. You know, and that's when I came to know what life was about. You know what pain and death, all these things that I had at that time no knowledge of. You know, and the fact that adults, they don't bother to tell children what's happening, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
at that time, you know, I remember it very clearly as if it happened yesterday, the day my grandfather died. And no one bothered to tell me what was going on. They were all immersed in their adult grief. They were all running around being sorry, being upset, you know, being hurt, weeping, and they didn't bother to tell the children, you know. Myself and my grandfather had adopted a whole heap of children, you know, a lot of kids, and all of them were there, and we all grew up together, you know. And at that time, I didn't realize what was going on, and I just wanted someone to be able to tell me what was happening. I had no idea. Even when we were burying him, you know, and I was standing at the grave and watching everyone weeping and crying, and I had no idea what was going on. All I knew was that I hadn't seen him for days, and I was really yearning to see him because we used to wake up together every morning, you know.
Mm.
And there I was, it was raining, and I was standing with my grandmother, and I could see everyone weeping, and I just had no idea that what was going on. Later, like days later at night, I was in the house with my grandmother. I was fast asleep, and I heard him calling, and I came out running, and my grandmother stopped me. She grabbed me. She heard it too, and she said, "That's not your grandfather." And I wanted to go out. You know, I was in a rage. I was crying, and I said, "I need to go and see him." You know, and then it's at that moment that I realized I would never see him, what had happened. And so, you know, after that, I came to really see a lot more than I had. Prior to that, life was like paradise. I had everything I wanted. It was beautiful, you know. But after that, that's when I started to really learn that, you know, people can be fickle. People can be cruel, you know. And then I lived in a series of homes, not with my mother often. I was with relatives and friends and her friends. They weren't necessarily my friends. This is the other thing. If you've got children, don't leave them with your friends, okay? Your friends might be good to you. They're not necessarily going to be good to your kids, you know? So that's the situation for me, I mean, it's not a happy memory, I guess, but it's a memory that I remind myself on what the world is about. And I don't take things for granted. So yeah, someone asked why the fuel prices are going up. The fuel prices are going up for a variety of reasons, but mainly because of the conflict that's taking place in Russia or between Russia and Ukraine. That's the main reason for the fuel prices going up. Because Russia is a major gas and oil producing nation. And all the consequential actions and reactions to that are affecting the prices and basically driving the prices up. Yeah. So
They asked that question.
they asked. I'm reading on your yeah. But anyway, that's
Maybe
yeah. And
maybe
anyway,
we can come to the questions at the end.
yeah. I can't help
We'll come.
myself. Someone asked the question, so I answered. But anyway, that's the reason. Well, that's the memory that I remember the most. It had a very profound impact on me, and I clung to that for years, for most of my life, you know. And as a result, I never fully sort of trust people because, and I'm always careful, you know, to make as much of a judgment of what is happening around me as I can, you know. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm sure like all of us have different special moments or memories that we have in our life. And for you to be able to share that with us, I'm sure it has taken a lot of courage for you to be able to share the story of your grandfather and his passing and how it made you feel. And the lesson from that is for us to take is to not take anything for granted, you know, in our lives. So
Sure.
it's very, yeah, it's so true in so many of our cultures today. I think we take so many things for granted, even our grandparents as well. We come from a community where we come from a society where it's very communal, that we are there with our parents, we are there with our grandparents, we are there with our tribe, and we don't really appreciate the value that they add to our lives, you know. It's
Sure.
like the
May I
moment you
add
leave and then
something
you
to that?
go.
I just
Absolutely, go
wanted to
ahead.
make this very important point. You know, in Melanesian society, clans, tribes, and I'm generalizing, so maybe I'm wrong, but having grown up in the highlands, in Momase, in the Nigini Islands, and in southern region, I kind of have a sense that it's very similar in many instances. Grandparents are the best parents. Okay, let me repeat that. Grandparents are the best parents. Why? Because through trial and error, they've learned to become the best parents. They've tried to raise their children first, and usually many of them are very young and they're growing up themselves as well. So they're not, they're not experienced in raising children. Okay, but after that experience, they know how best to raise children, how to be good to them,
Absolutely.
listen to them. And that's why grandparents are so cool. When you're with your grandparents, they will always be the best people you can ever interact with. They're patient, they will listen to you. They will be firm, but they'll be firm in a nice way. They're not going to just shut you down and be angry with you and belt you. I used to get belted a lot by my mother and my uncles, and I probably deserved it. You know, when I look back, think about it. When we always think of ourselves as being these great children, you know, that's not
Yeah.
true. I was a little, you know, I was a little tyrant at times, you know. So I deserve it. When I look at it, I think to myself, yeah, if I had been an adult, I would have belted me, and I would have, and I seen me as a kid. So I think of that. But grandparents are the best, and it's sad because we are losing that in our society, because we are now living a modern life where we have disconnected from the families, and we've become micro families, or what the Western nations say, nuclear families, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a point I wanted to make. And if you're out there and your grandparents are still alive, man, reach out to them and say hello to them more often. Hug them, tell them you love them, because I tell you what, they are amazing people. You know, I mean, not all. There's always one or two that's a bit crazy, but in general, most of them are pretty good. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I second that. I absolutely 100% agree with that. I didn't get the chance to meet my grandfather and
Oh,
grandmother. If I had the chance to meet them, my story would be probably as crazy as yours. But from what my mom told me, he was a warrior. He stood up for his land and he was dragged through the station because he didn't want to give the land. He didn't want to extend the boundaries of
mm,
the Vancouver station because the colonial masters were like, "Oh, give us your land and we'll build more, development." And then it was like, where will my grandchildren sit if I give all of the land to you? So he was dragged through the mud, made to eat the soil, and I think it was one of the reasons that he died because he was beaten so bad by these people. But I
sorry.
definitely agree, and I totally agree with you that grandparents are the most precious people on earth. And I also think that they hold the knowledge of the past, and
Yes,
they know what is happening in the present, and then they can give a clear direction of the future because they have lived the past, they've witnessed what has gone on, and they've seen the changes that has happened between their time and their children's time, which is our parents and our time. And so they will be in
absolutely.
a better position to give us the best advice that we need to really live the best life that we could. And of course, I agree with you that some of us were tyrants back then. Probably I wasn't a tyrant back then. I was very obedient, but for some, they had to get whooped. But that was a good thing because they had to learn something as well. But it's such a great story, and just listening to you sharing that, like it made me laugh because I've watched parents whoop their children because they weren't listening, and so they have to run to their grandparents to seek refuge and comfort.
And
So
get
that
what they
was that was
want.
amazing.
Because grandparents hardly ever say no, that you're the favorite. And they justify this by
Absolutely.
thinking that, well, they're old and they're not going to be around any longer, so they're going to make the most of it. That's how they think. But yeah, grandparents are cool. And if you have grandparents, make an effort to reach out to them and tell them you love them more, and do things for them that you can show them that you love them. The interesting thing
Absolutely.
in Melanesian society, which is sad also, is that grandparents, as you rightfully put it, were libraries, traditional libraries. We didn't have a
Yes.
written, we did not have a written language. Okay, so we maintained a lot of our history, our knowledge, and passed it on through oral communication, through plays, through jokes, through stories, through legends. And so I, for instance, learned so much about my people, their history, their journey, their struggles from my grandparents, because they told me these stories. And all of that is now, not all, but most of it is losing fast because they're not writing it down. Most of our grandparents didn't read and write, you know, and they're taking that information with them. It's like a library being burnt and you haven't read all the books in it, you know. That's the sad
Absolutely.
reality. Uh, I'm trying to record as many of these legends as I can, but I only know a fraction, and then my children will only know a very small amount of that information, and their children will know even less. So what's needed is all of us who still have grandparents, who still have connection, really need to record these stories. And it's so easy in this day and age because, well, you've got these smartphones, you can record these stories, you can get videos, and you can write them down, and so those are things that we can do now, so yeah.
Absolutely agree, and I hope that everyone, I'm sure everyone on the chat, you can see they are absolutely agreeing with our conversation.
Everybody's going to be
And
calling, if their grandparents are around, I bet you after this they're all going to call their grandparents, or if they're within reach,
yes,
go and
please,
hug them. Go and hug them.
please.
I wish I could hug
Mhm.
my grandmother or my grandfather every day. I think about that. I wish I could.
Absolutely, and that's one of the main mission of this kind of conversation and this platform is to awaken someone, make them aware of something, and then they can take action. So one of the action you just
Yes.
stated is actually like to really call your parents, hug them. I mean grandparents, and hug them. Like really ask them something that they have to tell you, something that you don't know. You might think that you know a lot of things, but you don't know. So as soon as you tell them, you ask them questions, they will tell you so many things that will and enlighten and enrich your understanding about life and about absolutely everything, anything. So wow, that was amazing. I know, like, for most of us, we see all the good stuff that happens, right? We see you leading in a parliament, leading in your community, in your province, and we don't really get to see what you go through, like challenge that you go through in a way. And I'm sure there's so many challenges that you go through as a leader, as someone who is leading, but maybe growing up, we go back to you growing up. Um, you said you grew up in a village, and that is something that all of us can relate to because we grew up in a village as well. At least 90% or 80%, let's say, to be on the safe side. What is one, like, you growing up? Was there some challenges you faced as a child or as a young adult, or as a young person? Do you think the challenges that you have faced back then is probably slightly different to the challenges that young people are facing now, or is it probably similar in some ways? And how did you try to maneuver um, and get around to solve or to work through this particular challenge? It could be something that really, really changed your perspective or change your life for the rest of your life, or it could be something small as well.
Well, firstly, about challenges, I think children of today, even though we tend to feel or think, assume that children have it easy today, and to a degree they may have it. I mean, in many instances, they have it easier. They've got amazing technology. For example, you can now fact check anything you want on the phone. You
Yeah.
can educate yourself with your phone, with the access to internet, and you can learn about any subject you want to learn about just from your phone. Okay, so that's a huge challenge, that has been overcome in this day and age that the young people of today may not realize. They may take that for granted. For instance, when we were young, at that age, we used to have books, and limited books, not all the books. If you came in from a poor family or a family that didn't have much, then you had, limitations. You have just a few books. That's it, you know. But today you've got a phone that can give access to you anything. Now, communication is another thing. You can communicate in real time instantly. Okay. For instance, when I was a kid growing up, and if we wanted to communicate with someone in town, say in
Mm.
Moresby, then you have to walk say someone in my village would have to walk 20 minutes to the river, cross the river. If it's not flooded, you got to cross the river. That takes you another 20 minutes. You walk to the main road, that's another 20 minutes. So it's an hour just to get to the road. Then you can wait anywhere between 20 minutes to 2 hours or longer for a vehicle. Then you get that vehicle and you go up to Kokoda. That's about an hour drive. And when you get there to the station, if you decide to go and make that call at the station, you have to hope that the station phone is open for use. Then you go, and if there are people standing in line, it's a whole day project just to make a phone call. Today, you can just pick up your phone and send a text or call, you know. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize, the young people of today, you know. And so technology has improved life significantly for our young people, has opened the door to vast opportunities, you know. But it's also complicated their lives. It's made life very complicated for our young people. They can't focus because they've got so many things happening all at the same time. They're distracted easily, you know, and it's disrupting their ability to perhaps enjoy life more. This just me thinking. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor or psychologist, so don't take my word for it. These are just my observations, you know. So as a result, you know, it's like anything. There is balance needed. The internet is great, but too much internet, it starts to eat away from your real life, you know. Social media is great, but too much social media, it can be toxic for you and take up a lot of your time that you could use doing other things, for instance, interacting with friends or relatives or your family, you know. So those are the challenges that I feel the young people face today. Today, also, you're bombarded with so many stressful situations. The technology of the internet has allowed you to have access to so much information, so much stress, that our bodies are taking a serious beating, okay? Your body cannot differentiate between real stress and perceived stress, okay? So for instance, you think people are, you know, someone posts a comment and you might take that personally. They might not be talking about you, but they'll put a status update, you know, about, you know, real friends wouldn't do that, for example. They might say that. You might take that seriously. You might take that and it would stress you out because you'd be thinking, what is he referring to? Is he referring to me? What did I do? That's already causing you to release the stress hormones that are already putting your body into fight or flight mode. And when that happens, it's shutting down your stem cell production system and it's depriving your body of those important cells that you need to maintain a healthy immune system. Okay, so that type of perceived stress is happening frequently and constantly. So a lot of our young people are stressed at you know, trying to manage these situations. And that's the challenge I see them facing today. It's also, for some reason, negativity is so much more abundantly out there than what's positive. You know, you just go on any social media page and you count how many positive comments are made as versus how many negative comments are made. People hate so easily. They love so, you know, less easily, I guess. That's just my observation. Sorry, I've spoken a little bit too long on the subject, but I think those are my observations. For me personally, growing up, I'm fortunate that I had a challenging life, but I'm also grateful knowing that there were many others who had a far more difficult life, you know. And I remember this saying, I believe it was Shakespeare, I may be wrong, but he said something like this. He said, I cried because I wanted shoes until I saw a man with no legs.
Oh, wow.
You know, so I think of my life, but I'm fortunate. I think of the lives of many others who were far more difficult, far more challenging, children who grew up in very abusive homes and who endured real suffering and pain. And then I think, man, my life was, you know, I have nothing to complain about. So I think that's what I like to help teach my children, is that no matter how bad you think things are, there are people out there who have life far worse. So be grateful for what you have, you know.
Absolutely agree, and those are like words of wisdom that we will never get from someone who is very, very, or any other person. And I am sure like all the young people who are listening in today will definitely be taking note of this and really think about how we can use what we have right now to improve our own lives as well as those of others that are around us. And to conclude this conversation, I'm sure I don't want to hold your time a little bit longer because this conversation is so great. Ah, and I'm so happy that it's happening. Just to conclude, I'm sure growing up, you had the passion. I don't know if it was probably you thinking about getting into politics when you were like a kid growing up to become a teenager. I'm sure it was different back then, but whatever it is, maybe you can tell us if this is something that you were passionate about, or when did it like the idea of starting to um, the idea to really, what will I say, take the stand and making the decision to really go into politics. Of course, we're going to cover that probably down the line, but what was something that you were passionate about growing up? Was it similar to what you're currently doing right now? Was it a little bit different, and why was that? And then from there we can end the conversation from there. Thank
Sure,
you.
sure. Thank you. And I've got 10% battery life, so the conversation might
Okay.
end prematurely. Anyway,
No worries.
I'll be as quick as possible. When I was
As
growing
quick
up,
as you can.
yes, I never thought of being a politician. In fact, this is a true story. I wanted to own a bus, and it would be the best bus. It would have great music and good seats, and on our way from Kokoda to Popondetta, we'd be able to stop in the middle where people can refresh themselves and continue this journey. That was my dream, okay? And that's from years of going up and down that road, that dusty road in Kokoda. And by the way, that road will be maintained for 5 years now under the TSSP program. Thanks to the Australian government, they trusted us and they're working with us on this. And in those 5 years' time, we're going to seal it. So that's an achievement I wanted to just
Oh,
highlight. Yeah. So
that's wonderful. Congrats. Congratulations.
thank you. And that was my dream, to be a bus driver. So I came to uni. I said, I'll work, get some money, save up. And I even worked as a bus crew on a bus here in Mosby. There's a good brother of mine, my Hagen family, Olga the Hagen or Ronin Baslo Mosby. So David Morrow, he is my good big brother of me. He had a few buses. So holiday time, Misa bus crew or bus went. And that strengthened my passion to be a bus owner. Had no clue, no idea about politics. I was not interested. But we had some activists at uni, and they had us all agitated about a World Bank policy to register all the land and make it available for businesses so that they could use that as the registered land as collateral and be able to use it for development purposes. We went against that, and we marched. We marched and we burned cars and we went screaming and we kicked out the prime minister at that time. I'm not sure who it was, or we didn't kick him out, but we stopped him. We had 2 instances of these protests. And, it was a very fearful time at the Forum Square at university, listening to our leaders, our student leaders, talk to us about the importance of land. And coming from home, I suddenly thought about my grandfather's land in Kokoda, and then my village and my families. And I thought of how would it be if they didn't have that land? And that started to plant a seed in my mind. And I said, we must never lose our land. Whatever happens in this country, we must never lose our land. It's our only real security, you know. So that was a seed that was planted in my mind. Then I worked for customs. You know, that's another story, but eventually I worked for customs as a junior officer, and I worked my way through to the enforcement division in the investigations and in border security intelligence sections. And when you're working in these certain areas, you have access to vast information about what is really happening in your country and who's really in charge, who really calls the shots. And I can tell you, it's frightening that your country, you're not in charge of it at all. Not at all. That the 16th of September 1975 really doesn't mean much because you're not in charge of your country. That's political independence. Your real independence is economic independence, and you hardly have that, you know. So that's what started to, having access to all this information, I started to think, how can I make a difference? And then seeing what was happening, especially in the illegal logging front, where there was so much happening, and we fought against these people. I had a wonderful boss, David Soder. He was a true patriot. He is a true patriot. And I saw him being completely, you know, taken apart because he stood for what was right. And so, you know, I tried at my level to do what I could. And then when I exhausted all those possibilities, I said, maybe I could make a difference in Parliament. And I got into Parliament and I realized that I'm just one person. And the forces that are in Parliament are far too powerful for just one person. I can say what I want and do what I want. All I jump up and down and scream and rant and rave and shout, it's not going to make a difference. Not much in there. But if I can make a difference by agitating and getting the young people to step up and stand up, if I can help educate them about the facts that they need to know, that their country is not in safe hands. It's not in their hands. Their future has been constructed by very powerful forces that we don't even know. Well, some of us know, but the greater majority don't. That no matter who the government is, and no matter how hard they try, you know, unless there's a critical mass of patriotic leaders in Parliament who come together, we're going to still go down in that downward spiral towards rock bottom. And that's scary. That scares me a lot. But on the other hand, when I see young people such as yourself and many others who are so, they don't have the colonized mindset. They're so smart, they're so sharp. When I see that, I see hope. That's the light at the end of the tunnel, you know. And I'm satisfied if I can contribute in some way to that effort, you know, then I'm satisfied that at least I've done in my own way something to contribute to my country. Now I want to say something important here. We have to understand that in every country, Asian countries, Western countries, communist countries, democratic countries, in every country, all people like you and me are the same. They want what's best for their children. They want a better future. But just like our country, their countries, their governments are often owned by very powerful forces that even they don't know and they can't control. So, anyway, that's those are my thoughts.
You just spoke so much in this, I don't know, 1 to 3 minutes. And I am challenged right now. I am challenged to the core of my being to be a patriotic Papua New Guinean, because there's not much of that in our country right now. And if we have that, people who are prideful of this country, right? People who are prideful that we come from this land and we own this land and we are from this land, we can change this land for the better of our children and the generations to come. Like, we have people like you and like, we need people like you. That's what I'm trying to say. We need people like you who have your mindset, And if young people who are tuning in to this afternoon and listening to this, and if you feel in your heart that you have to do something about this, and you feel that this is the standard you want to take every advice that the governor has given you, and really act upon it, because at the end of this show, this conversation, I want you to be able to take action in whatever way that you feel you want to take action. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Governor Gary Juffa. Thank you for this time with me. And this is the first of several conversations that we will have, because there's so much that you have that we don't get to hear more often. And I thank you for joining social media so that we can be able to connect with leaders like you. And I think all the parliamentarians should have a social media platform. Seriously, they should have an Instagram, they should have Facebook, all of these things, so that, whatever that they are doing, we can be connected to them, connected to, to keep ourselves updated to what they're doing. I was just curious, so I checked every government of the country, and any country in the world, and I saw every government or every country, they have an official Twitter, official Facebook, official Instagram. How about Papua New Guinea? How can we know that our leaders are doing something? How can I know that my governor is doing something? How can I know that my MP is doing something in my electorate, in my province, if they don't have a platform that we can connect with? So I checked for Finland and all the European countries. All of these leaders, MPs from the little, like LLG and ward level, I don't know whatever they call it there, all the way to the national, they all are on Instagram. They have verified accounts on Instagram, or even Twitter as well. And then I look at New Zealand, I look at USA as well. I try to search every, political leaders, and everyone is on Instagram. They have their, verified accounts. I was like, why can Papua New Guinea do this, so that we can easily access our leaders and ask questions and interact and have conversations with them? So I really appreciate and applaud you for keeping your leadership and what you're doing 100%, clear, and having the platform where for people like us to be able to connect with you. That's huge for me, especially for a young person like me. It's very huge, and I know and I believe that down the line, the leaders who are coming up have to find a way on how they can keep the communications going on with their, constituency, or with their voters, or with their supporters, because it's very important. That's the way forward for the technology age. We cannot be isolated anymore. We have to find a way to stay connected and stay updated, and whatever. And you have been doing a great job on that. So thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough. And I've been dreading to interview you all this time, but now that it's over and we have established a conversation, I can be able to, relax and interview you the next time. So
Sure.
thank you again for this wonderful time, and for taking your time to have this conversation with me. And I don't know if there's something, a last word of encouragement that you want to share with a young person or someone that has shared the same childhood as yours. What would that be before we close?
Well, firstly, thank you for all of you who have been out there listening and contributing. I want to, just say that everything I say, please check it, fact check, okay? Go and check dates and figures and statistics that I mentioned. You have a smartphone, you can be smart and use it. This is another funny thing. There's a lot of people with smartphones, but they don't know how to use them in a smart way. Anyhow, so please fact check whatever I say. That's one. Two, I am not an expert on anything. I'm just a person who is trying his best. I'm making an effort. So, I make mistakes too, and I've made a number of mistakes, at home. And every time, if I forget my mistakes, I'm grateful for social media, because someone's going to remind me, even of mistakes that I haven't made, they'll still remind me. Anyway, And that's good. I used to have a Twitter account, but I've been blocked. I don't know how to get back into it. So I have Instagram and Facebook. My office has Instagram and Facebook, and we're restructuring our administration now. So Oro is going to have a website and Facebook, Instagram, and all our council presidents and all our PEC and assembly members I will insist that they all have accounts as well, so that official press, statements can be released and people can have access to them. It's very important for this, and we should be so grateful we have the technology opportunity to inform our people. I think these interactions are great. I don't mind being asked any question by people about what my decisions are in regards to my work and why. And I think we should be able to put ourselves out there so that people can hold us to account. For young people, listen, whatever you're going through, it doesn't rain every day. Tomorrow the sun's going to shine. That's going to happen. So whatever situation, if it's a bad situation, it'll pass. And you'll have a better day and you'll be able to make use of that. So learn to live rather than exist. That's what I say. A lot of people exist, they don't live. You need to learn the art of living. It's very important, and that's a message I'd like to tell a lot of our young people out there. You're going to encounter a lot of people who are going to try to tear you down. They don't like your presence. They don't like your energy because it reminds them that they're inadequate or that they're not doing enough or of their failures. And they're feeling anxious and vulnerable about that. And so the way to make themselves feel better is to attack you, okay? Don't worry about it. They're going to keep attacking you. Let them say what they want. I look at it this way. I'm walking down this road. It's a whole heap of dogs barking at me. If I stopped and threw a stone at every one of these dogs, I might not make it to the end of the road. Let them bark. I need to get to the end of the road. So young people, all that effort, all that energy that's been projected at you that's maybe negative, don't let it discourage you from living. Go live your life. Do your best. And again, thank you all for listening and your comments. I look forward to the next conversation we will have. I'd love to talk about these things, about the fact that we're not independent, that we think we're independent, but we're not. And you might say, well, why? Why do you think that? Well, I'll tell you why. About the fact that transnational criminal organizations are very entrenched in PNG, and they have a lot of political stock. And they control what happens in government a lot. They change and put governments in power. That's very frightening. We should not be in that situation. And they're even bigger, more powerful forces than they, and they're here. It's quite scary. Also, there's a lot of good people out there in Parliament, okay? Many of them aren't saying much or doing much, but I tell you what, they're not bad people, okay? So if you're going to attack someone or hear about them and then project it out there, post it, check your facts first before you do it. That's just some other advice that I would like to add to this. And thank you very much, guys. This has been very helpful. Also, just very quickly before we close up, if you also have to have an outlet. You also have to have an outlet for yourself. If you play music or if you play sports, you've got to do a bit of that every day, okay? Maintain yourself through that outlet. I paint, that's what I do. So this is my table, it's full of paintings, you can see. It's all these incomplete paintings. And this is a big piece this is a big piece that I just did. It's It's called The Guardians of the Forest. You can see him there. And this is another one that's in progress. So
that's amazing.
So yeah, so if
That
you
is
can,
amazing.
Get an outlet. I paint. I try to play a bit of guitar. My guitar's there.
Oh,
I'm not a great musician, so I'm not going on tour very soon. And I try to keep myself fit by going and playing a bit of squash every day or every second day. And that's what I do. Thank you all.
Yeah.
And have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Governor. Thank you, and I really appreciate it. You're free to leave us now, but thank you so much.
You're
Thank you
welcome. Have a great
for
night.
joining us.
No
And
worries.
lastly, are you selling those pieces of art? Is there any possible ways that you're selling it? Will people be
I have to.
buying it?
I'm forcing myself to sell them. I normally give them away as presents, but I'm starting to sell them because I have a little few projects like
Yes,
charity projects that I
absolutely.
engage in, so that the sales help me to maintain those projects.
Yes, I
A
agree.
lot of medical projects, like there are people who need medical assistance, and I help them out. And so if I sell these paintings, I get a bit of money. I can, help people who are in need. That's what I do it for. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I will encourage everyone on here, please go and check Governor Juffa's um arts, and then you can DM him, right? And they can DM you, send you a
Yes.
message, and then if you can refer them to someone who is selling your arts, and then they can buy it from you. We need to support this kind of initiative. So that's great. I might as well get one from you, so I'll see about that.
Yeah. I've got the big
But
pieces, and I also do these little pieces like this. This is a micro painting. It's a
that is
forest.
absolutely stunning.
It's not finished yet, but
Beautiful.
so little things like that. And I've got a book that I've finished. It's about my childhood. So I'm planning to do an exhibition of my paintings and launch my book. And I'll let you know so that maybe we can, do something about that. So
Absolutely.
encourage young people, especially, to get into it. There's some amazing
Yeah.
children out there that are so talented, and if no one encourages them, they don't act on it. So
Yeah.
yeah, no problem.
Absolutely true. And thank you so
Yeah,
much, Governor.
no
It was
problem. Have a
amazing
great
speaking
night.
with you. I look forward to our next conversation again. So thank
Yes,
you.
anytime. Good
Thank you
night.
very much.
Good night,
Have
guys.
a good afternoon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye bye. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Honorable Gary Juffa from, Honorable Gary Juffa, and he's the governor of Oro Province. And it was great speaking with him about just getting to know him and what he does, um, and what who he was growing up. So this is Gary Juffa. Gary Juffa without the politics, without the activism. This is who he is. This is his story. So I wanted to be able to bring you his story so that we can get into the political and activism side of things. So I hope that you've learned so much from him. You have connected with him in one way or the other. In some of the stories that he shared, I definitely have connected with him on all the stories that he has shared. So I absolutely thank you all for joining in. I am blown away by all the positive messages that are coming in. Please stay on because we have amazing guests lined up for this year. And then following, it will be amazing all throughout. So stay tuned in, follow me, and let's have this conversation going. So thank you so much all for joining me. And that is all for tonight and for this episode's conversation. And I will see you all in the next conversation. Please keep an eye out on the next guest that will be coming up. And of course, we will have Governor Juffa join us again in another series of conversation. So thank you. And may you all have a wonderful afternoon. And if you're tuning in from anywhere else in the world, it's a beautiful afternoon here in the capital city of Papua New Guinea, Port Moresby. And I wish you all the very best and a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful time from everyone who is waiting. I mean, not waiting, everyone who is tuning in from around the world. So thank you for joining me and you have a lovely afternoon. All right. Bye bye.